The boardroom fell silent when James strode in with a folder under his arm and a satisfied grin that told me everything I needed to know. I had worked at Meridian Consulting for 8 years, consistently outperforming targets and mentoring the new recruits who inevitably sought me out when they needed guidance. The regional director position had been vacant for 3 months, and after 2 rounds of interviews and a presentation that had the executive team nodding appreciatively, I felt confident. Too confident, perhaps. James had been with the company for just 18 months. He was charming, quick-witted, and related to our CEO's wife through some distant family connection that he never explicitly mentioned but somehow always managed to weave into conversations. I watched him shake hands with the executive team, his smile growing wider as he caught my eye across the room. "Sarah, thanks for coming," said Michael, our CEO, gesturing for me to take a seat. "We wanted to share some news with you personally before making the announcement company-wide." I already knew. The gentle tone, the sympathetic glances, the way Helena from HR had positioned herself near the door, as if anticipating the need for a swift exit. I had seen this scene play out before with others, but never thought I would be the one sitting in this chair, maintaining a professional smile while my stomach twisted into knots. "We've decided to offer the regional director position to James," Michael continued, his voice measured. "Your work has been outstanding, truly. But we feel James brings a fresh perspective that aligns with our new direction." Fresh perspective. New direction. The corporate euphemisms for choosing youth over experience. Flash over substance. I nodded, my face a careful mask of professional disappointment. "I understand," I said. Though I didn't. 8 years of late nights, canceled vacations, and solved crises counted for nothing against 18 months of confident handshakes and casual references to shared vacation spots in the Hamptons. James leaned forward, his expression arranged in what he probably thought was empathy. "I hope we can continue working closely, Sarah. Your experience is invaluable to the team." The condescension in his voice made my skin crawl, but I maintained my composure. As I walked back to my desk, I could feel eyes following me, curious, pitying, relieved it wasn't them. My computer screen blurred as I stared at it, not seeing the emails piling up or the meeting notifications chiming insistently. All I could think about was the project proposal sitting in my top drawer, the one that could transform our struggling East Coast operations, the one I had been saving to present in my new role. By evening, when most had left for the day, I remained at my desk, a strange calm settling over me. I pulled out the proposal, flipping through pages of research, financial projections, and market analyses. This wasn't just about a promotion anymore. It was about proving my worth in a company that had started to feel like quicksand beneath my feet. I didn't cry or rage. Instead, I opened my laptop and began to revise my proposal. If they wanted a fresh perspective, I would give them one they couldn't ignore. The announcement came via company-wide email the next morning. Congratulatory responses flooded in, with colleagues outdoing each other to express their enthusiasm for James's promotion. I watched the reply-all chain grow, noting who was quick to align themselves with the new power structure and who remained silent. The politics were predictable but no less disheartening. My phone buzzed with a message from Diane, the only executive who had fought for my promotion according to office whispers. "Coffee?" "Outside the building." 15 minutes. We met at a small cafe across the street, far enough from Meridian's glass fortress to speak freely. Diane didn't waste time with platitudes. "They made the wrong choice," she said, stirring her cappuccino. "But you know that already." "What happened in those final meetings?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity any longer. Diane sighed, her eyes darting around before leaning closer. "Michael wants to position the company for acquisition. James has connections with Westfield Partners. They think he can help facilitate a smoother transition." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. 8 years of building client relationships based on trust and long-term growth, only for the company to pivot toward being sold to the highest bidder. No wonder my experience had become a liability rather than an asset. "They're not announcing the potential sale yet," Diane continued. "But they're restructuring teams, reviewing contracts, streamlining operations, preparing to be gutted." I finished her sentence. Back at the office, James had already moved into the corner office with the harbor view. His first order of business was to call a department meeting to discuss his vision. I sat in the back, watching my colleagues nod enthusiastically at ideas I had proposed years ago, but had been deemed too ambitious or costly. Now, coming from James, they were revolutionary. During the following weeks, subtle changes began to take shape. My highest-performing clients were reassigned for strategic realignment. Meetings occurred without my knowledge, only to be mentioned casually afterward. My input was solicited but ignored. I became a ghost in a building I once considered my second home. Lisa, a junior analyst I had mentored since her first day, stopped by my desk one afternoon, her expression troubled. "James asked me to revise these reports," she whispered, sliding a folder across my desk. "He said they need a more contemporary approach." I opened the folder to find my quarterly analyses, the frameworks I had developed and refined over years. "What exactly needs to be contemporary about data analysis?" Lisa glanced around nervously. "He said your methods are outdated, that clients want something more visual, less detailed. Code for less likely to reveal flaws in the strategy being developed for potential buyers." I thanked Lisa, assuring her it wasn't her fault. After she left, I sat in silence, a cold realization washing over me. This wasn't just about being passed over for promotion. They were systematically erasing my contribution to create a narrative that suited their purposes. That evening, I stayed late again, this time going through files I had access to, documenting inconsistencies in the new reports, noting the discrepancies between the promises being made to clients and the actual plans being formulated. I wasn't sure what I would do with this information yet, but knowledge had always been my strongest weapon. 3 months into James's reign, the facade began to crack. Clients were noticing the shift in service quality, asking pointed questions about changes to their portfolios. James's contemporary approach had stripped away the nuanced risk assessments and personalized strategies that had retained our most valuable clients for years. His solutions were flashy but hollow, designed to impress in presentations but faltering in execution. I maintained meticulous records of every deviation from established protocols, every instance where client concerns were brushed aside, not out of vindictiveness, but self-preservation. When things inevitably fell apart, I refused to be collateral damage in someone else's failure. The opportunity to use this information came sooner than expected. On a rain-soaked Tuesday morning, I arrived to find Lawrence Chandler, our oldest and most valuable client, waiting in the reception area, his face flushed with anger. "Where's James?" he demanded when he saw me. "My calls have been ignored for 2 days." James was at a golf retreat with Michael and representatives from Westfield Partners. He'd left strict instructions not to be disturbed unless the building was literally on fire. I guided Lawrence to a conference room, my mind racing through possible responses. "Lawrence, I'll be honest with you," I began, closing the door. "I'm not managing your account anymore." "What? Since when? Nobody told me anything about this." "That's part of the problem," I said, taking a calculated risk. "There have been significant changes in our approach, and communication hasn't been a priority." Lawrence leaned back, his shrewd eyes assessing me. "Sarah, I've worked with you for 6 years. You've never been anything but straightforward with me. What's really happening here?" I had a choice to make. I could maintain company loyalty despite how they had treated me, or I could tell Lawrence the truth about his portfolio and the impending sale. The ethical implications weighed heavily. Client confidentiality versus corporate allegiance versus basic human decency. "The company is positioning for acquisition," I said finally, my voice low but steady. "Your portfolio has been adjusted to make short-term projections more attractive to potential buyers." Lawrence's expression darkened. "Show me." I pulled up the files I had been documenting, the original projections alongside the new ones, the risk assessments that had been buried, the false assurances in meeting minutes. Lawrence, a former financial analyst himself, understood immediately. "This borders on fraud," he said quietly. "I wouldn't go that far," I replied, feeling a sudden need to defend the company despite everything. "It's aggressive optimization, creative presentation. It's deception," Lawrence corrected, standing abruptly. "And I won't be part of it." By that afternoon, Lawrence had pulled his account, over $30 million in managed assets. By evening, he had contacted 3 other major clients who were similarly unhappy with recent changes. By the next morning, James was back from his retreat, pacing the executive floor like a caged animal while Michael made frantic calls from his office. I was summoned just before lunch. James, Michael, and Helena from HR were waiting, their expressions ranging from fury to resignation. "Did you speak to Lawrence Chandler yesterday?" Michael asked without preamble. "Yes," I answered simply. No denials, no justifications. "And did you disclose confidential information about company strategy?" I answered his questions about his own portfolio honestly. James slammed his hand on the table. "You disclosed information about a potential acquisition. You violated every confidentiality agreement in your contract." I disclosed that his portfolio had been manipulated to appear more profitable in the short term at the expense of long-term stability, I clarified. My calm a stark contrast to his outburst. Information he had every right to know as our client. The tension in the room was palpable. Helena handed me a document, termination papers already filled out. My eyes scanned the text, noting the careful phrasing that placed all blame squarely on my shoulders. Breach of confidentiality, undermining company leadership, interfering with client relationships. "Sign it," Michael said, his voice tired. "We're prepared to offer 3 months severance, provided you sign a non-disclosure agreement covering all aspects of your employment and termination." I looked at each of them in turn, Michael avoiding my gaze, Helena's professional mask firmly in place, James barely containing his triumph. 8 years reduced to a signature on a severance package that would barely cover my expenses while I searched for a new position. "I need time to review this with my lawyer," I said, placing the papers back on the table. It was a small act of defiance, but in that moment, it felt like the first real choice I had made in months. My lawyer, Rebecca Chen, reviewed the termination papers with a practiced eye in her downtown office. Rain tapped against the windows as she made notes, occasionally pausing to ask questions about specific incidents or conversations. "They're on shaky ground," she said finally, removing her glasses. "You disclosed information to a client about his own investments. That's not just defensible. It could be argued it was your fiduciary duty. But the acquisition plans were relevant to his financial interests," she finished. "And nowhere in your contract does it specifically prohibit disclosing potential corporate restructuring if it directly impacts client portfolios." I hadn't expected this assessment. For days I'd carried the weight of what felt like professional suicide, questioning whether my moment of honesty had been worth sacrificing a career I'd spent years building. "What are you suggesting?" Rebecca's smile was subtle but confident. "I'm suggesting we don't sign their agreement. I'm suggesting we counter." The next morning, I received a call from Diane that changed everything. 4 more clients pulled their accounts yesterday, she said without greeting. "Lawrence Chandler is organizing something of a revolt." My stomach tightened. "I never told him to—" "I know," she interrupted, "but he's been making calls. Turns out your detailed records of client interactions over the years created quite a loyal following. People remember how you handled their accounts during the recession." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment's small kitchen, staring at the rain through the window. The enormity of what was happening settled over me like a physical weight. This wasn't just about my job anymore. It was about an entire system that rewarded the wrong things, that valued connections over competence, flash over substance. My phone rang again, an unknown number. "Sarah Mitchell?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "Yes? My name is Eleanor Wright, senior partner at Wright & Blackwell Wealth Management. I understand you may be in transition. Lawrence Chandler suggested we speak." The conversation lasted nearly an hour. Eleanor explained that her firm had been watching Meridian's client exodus with interest. They weren't just offering me a position, they were proposing I lead a new division catering specifically to the clients leaving Meridian, with autonomy over strategy, and a significant stake in the division's success. "We've needed someone with your expertise for some time," Eleanor explained. "Someone who understands that client relationships are built on trust, not quarterly projections." By the time I met Rebecca at Meridian the following day for our scheduled meeting with Michael and the legal team, I felt a strange sense of calm. The building that had once been my second home now seemed foreign, its glass and steel facade suddenly cold and impersonal. Michael looked haggard. The stress of hemorrhaging clients had taken its toll. The company lawyer, A stern man I'd only seen at holiday parties sat rigidly beside him. James was conspicuously absent. "We've reviewed your severance package," Rebecca began smoothly, "and found the terms unacceptable." Michael's eyes narrowed. Ms. Mitchell violated clear company policies. Ms. Mitchell upheld her ethical obligation to her client, Rebecca countered, sliding a document across the table. "This is our counter-proposal." The terms were straightforward. No admission of wrongdoing, 6 months severance, and, most importantly, no non-compete clause. Michael's face darkened as he read. "This is absurd," the company lawyer sputtered. "After the damage she's caused?" "The damage," Rebecca said calmly, "was caused by mismanagement and deception. My client merely answered a direct question honestly. Unless Meridian wishes to argue in court that lying to clients is company policy, I suggest you consider our terms carefully." The silence that followed was electric. Michael glanced at his lawyer, then back at me, seeing me perhaps for the first time not as an employee to be managed, but as a force to be reckoned with. "Where's James today?" I asked, breaking the tension. Michael's jaw tightened. "Dealing with client relations. Is that what we're calling damage control now?" In that moment, watching Michael's composure crack, I realized something fundamental had shifted. The power dynamic that had defined our relationship for 8 years had been irreversibly altered. I wasn't fighting to save my job anymore. I was negotiating the terms of my liberation. After the meeting, I walked through Meridian's open floor plan to collect personal items from my desk. Conversation stopped as I passed. Colleagues averted their eyes or pretended sudden interest in their computer screens. The silence was punctuated only by the hum of air conditioning and the distant ring of unanswered phones. Lisa intercepted me near the break room, her voice low and urgent. "James is cleaning out his office. They're saying he's being transferred to the Minneapolis branch." Minneapolis, where careers went to die at Meridian. The corporate equivalent of exile to Siberia. That was fast, I remarked, surprised at how little satisfaction I felt. James had been a symptom, not the disease. The system that elevated him remained intact. "He's furious," Lisa continued, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Blaming everyone but himself, especially you." I nodded, thanking her for the warning before continuing to my desk. The personal items I'd accumulated over 8 years fit into a single cardboard box. Family photos, a ceramic mug from a conference in Boston, a small potted succulent that had somehow survived years of neglect. As I packed, I felt strangely disconnected from these artifacts of my professional life. "Enjoying your victory lap?" James stood behind me, his earlier confidence replaced by barely contained rage. His tie was loose, his hair disheveled, his eyes bloodshot from what I suspected was lack of sleep rather than emotion. "There's no victory here, James," I said quietly, continuing to place items in my box. "Just consequences." "You had no right," he hissed, stepping closer. "Those clients were mine." "Those clients were people," I corrected, finally looking up at him. "With retirement plans and children's college funds and dreams they've spent decades building. Not numbers on a spreadsheet you could manipulate to impress Michael or Westfield partners." James's face contorted. "You think you're so righteous? You know what your problem is, Sarah? You never learned to play the game. 8 years and you still think merit matters more than connections." "Maybe that's not my problem," I replied, standing to face him directly. "Maybe that's yours." For a moment I thought he might actually strike me. His hands flexed at his sides, his breathing shallow and rapid. But beneath the anger I saw something else. Fear. The realization that the shortcuts he'd relied on had led him to a precipice. "You have no idea what you've done," he said finally, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The acquisition was everything. Michael had promised." He stopped himself, but not before I understood. "He promised you'd run the merged company," I finished for him. "That's why you took such risks with the client portfolios. You were padding the numbers to boost the sale price." James didn't confirm or deny, but his silence was answer enough. The scope of their plan and its collapse became suddenly clear. It hadn't just been about promoting someone with connections. It had been a calculated effort to manufacture value where none existed. "Here's some free advice," I said, picking up my box. "When you get to Minneapolis, try actually doing the work. You might be surprised what you're capable of when you can't rely on shortcuts." As I walked away, I heard him call after me. They'll never let you succeed. You think other firms are different? The same people sit on all the boards, play at the same country club. I didn't turn back. His words faded as the elevator doors closed, sealing me off from a world I had once desperately wanted to belong to. Now I felt only relief at my escape. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through clouds, reflecting off puddles and the glass facades of neighboring buildings. I took a deep breath of fresh air, free from the recycled atmosphere of corporate ambition. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor Wright. "Office ready whenever you are. Team excited to meet you." I typed a quick reply confirming I'd be there tomorrow, then slipped the phone back into my pocket. For the first time in months, I felt a surge of genuine excitement about the future. Not because I'd won some corporate battle or proven my worth, but because I'd rediscovered what mattered to me. Doing work with integrity, serving clients who trusted me, building something meaningful rather than merely profitable. As I hailed a taxi, I glanced back at Meridian's imposing headquarters one last time. I had given that building 8 years of my life, sacrificed weekends and holidays, missed family gatherings and friends' celebrations, all for the promise of advancement that had ultimately been withheld because I hadn't played the game correctly. Yet somehow, in losing that game, I had found something more valuable: the courage to walk away, to stand my ground, to value my own integrity over institutional approval. It wasn't the lesson I had expected to learn after 8 years, but perhaps it was the one I needed most. Wright and Blackwell occupied the 15th floor of a converted warehouse in the financial district. Unlike Meridian's sterile glass and chrome aesthetic, their offices featured exposed brick walls, wooden beams, and comfortable meeting spaces designed for actual conversation rather than intimidation. When I stepped off the elevator on my first day, Eleanor greeted me personally, eschewing formality for a warm handshake and genuine smile. "Most of the team is already here," she said, guiding me through an open workspace where people glanced up with curious, welcoming expressions. "We've set aside that corner office for you. Natural light, view of the harbor, but glass walls so everyone knows your door is always metaphorically open." The contrast with Meridian's hierarchical floor plan was striking. Here, senior partners worked alongside analysts. Administrative staff participated in strategic discussions, and private offices existed for practicality rather than status. By mid-morning, I had met most of my new colleagues and heard the same message repeated. They were excited about my approach to client relationships. Lawrence Chandler had apparently been quite vocal about my integrity, creating something of a legend before I'd even arrived. "You've got a fan club already," Eleanor remarked as we reviewed the client list over lunch. 7 former Meridian clients have signed with us specifically to work with you." The number surprised me. 7? I only spoke to Lawrence. "Word travels fast in financial circles," she said with a knowing smile, "especially when someone finally stands up to the old boys network." My phone had been buzzing periodically throughout the day, former colleagues from Meridian reaching out with varying degrees of apology and curiosity. I'd responded politely but briefly, not yet ready to rebuild those bridges. The most unexpected message came from Diane. "Westfield Partners pulled out completely. Michael resigned this morning. Board an emergency session." I showed Eleanor the text, unsure how to feel about the cascading consequences of what had started as a simple moment of honesty with a client. "Are you surprised?" she asked, studying my expression. "That it collapsed so quickly?" "Yes, that it collapsed at all?" "No." I set the phone aside. They were building on sand and calling it bedrock. In the following weeks, I threw myself into establishing the new division. Eleanor gave me remarkable freedom to implement systems and approaches that had been repeatedly rejected at Meridian. We hired 2 analysts away from competing firms, bringing fresh perspective without the toxic culture that had defined my previous workplace. Most fulfilling was reconnecting with clients on my own terms, explaining strategies clearly without corporate jargon, presenting realistic projections instead of optimistic fantasies, acknowledging risks alongside opportunities. Many expressed relief at the transparency, confessing they'd felt increasingly confused by Meridian's communications in recent months. Lawrence Chandler visited personally during my 3rd week, settling into a chair across from my desk with satisfaction. "This suits you," he observed, gesturing to the office. "Authority without pretension." "I'm still adjusting," I admitted. Keep expecting someone to countermand my decisions or tell me I'm being too cautious. Lawrence chuckled. You know why I first moved my business to you at Meridian years ago? Everyone else was promising unrealistic returns during the boom. You were the only one talking about protection during the inevitable downturn. And then the market crashed, I remembered, and I lost 8% while others lost 30%. He leaned forward. That's when I knew you valued my financial security more than your bonus structure. A month into my new position, I received an email that momentarily took my breath away. The subject line read simply, "An apology is owed." It was from Michael, no longer using his Meridian email address. His message was brief but direct. The board had investigated the changes made under James's direction and discovered levels of misrepresentation far beyond what I had revealed to Lawrence. They had self-reported to regulatory authorities and were cooperating with an inquiry. Most surprisingly, Michael acknowledged that my actions, while inconvenient for Meridian's short-term plans, had likely prevented a much larger scandal. You did what I should have done, he wrote. Questioned the numbers instead of celebrating them. I lost sight of what matters in this business, trust. I didn't respond immediately, allowing his words to settle. There was validation in his acknowledgement, but I felt no triumph. Financial management had never been a zero-sum game to me. There was nothing to gain from Meridian's collapse that couldn't have been achieved through their reform. That evening, I stayed late at the office, reviewing client portfolios and drafting a 5-year strategic plan for our division. Through the glass walls, I could see a few team members still working, comfortable and focused in the informal atmosphere we'd created together. My phone lit up with a text from my sister. Dinner at my place Sunday? Kids keep asking when Aunt Sarah is coming over now that she doesn't work all the hours. I smiled, typing back a confirmation. The work would always be there, but it no longer consumed every waking moment. I had found something I hadn't realized was possible. Professional fulfillment that complemented rather than competed with personal wholeness. As I gathered my things to leave, I paused at the window overlooking the harbor. Lights from boats and buildings reflected on the dark water, a constellation of human activity continuing into the night. Somewhere in that landscape stood Meridian's headquarters, where I had once measured my worth by how well I fit into someone else's vision. Now I was creating my own, defined not by titles or corner offices, but by the integrity of relationships, with clients, with colleagues, and finally, with myself.